photograph. Early one morning in June last year, a mother duck led her 9 ducklings across a major boulevard right in the center of Tokyo. She was headed for the moat around the Imperial Palace. Even though it was early, there was traffic on the road. Why would she have done it? Our tale begins with this single photograph. Tokyo, the capital of Japan. Population, 12 million. At the heart of the city is the palace where the emperor lives, and it is surrounded by office buildings. With 14,000 people per square kilometer, Tokyo is one of the world's most densely populated economic capitals. In the middle of this concrete jungle stands an office building, landscaped with a garden, with a man-made pond. Last year, a mother duck nested here. In this pond, she taught her ducklings how to swim, and on the concrete plaza around it, she taught them how to walk. Then one day, she boldly moved her family all the way to the Imperial Moat, some 200 meters, taking them through the heaviest traffic in Tokyo. And again this year, the mother duck appeared at the pond on the very same day. Again, she hatched her eggs here. This time, an even dozen. We wondered whether she would employ the same bold moving tactic this year too, taking the ducklings across the busy thoroughfare. Here in the heart of the downtown business district, the plaza quickly filled up at lunch hour with people hoping for a glimpse of the tiny invaders from the wild. We all knew the story of Make Way for Ducklings in Boston, and we'd heard similar reports from many other cities around the world. But still, this certainly seemed worth watching. Would it be a heartwarming tale sent by a whimsical god? Or were we meant to learn a harder lesson? The spot-billed duck. It inhabits a wide area from the temperate and tropical zones of Asia to Europe, and is a favorite of hunters. Spot-billed ducks in the wild nest and hatch their young at small ponds or swamps, and then move them to larger rivers or marshlands. This practice protects the ducklings at their most defenseless age, but the move itself is fraught with peril and takes many lives. It seemed certain that the mother duck would follow this natural practice, but in the unlikely form of a procession from a man-made pond near an office building, across a major thoroughfare to the palace moat. This is the photographer who captured the crossing last year, Eiji Tsubayama. He watches over the ducklings with the kindly gaze of a father duck. They were a peaceful, happy family, but what lay ahead? What unnatural enemies might they encounter in these civilized surroundings? We also found a flock of news gatherers belonging to the human species. It was 3:30 a.m. Just 4 weeks had passed since the ducklings had hatched. The ducklings would have to practice walking before they could hike the 200 meters to the moat. Downstairs, across 8 lanes, and over a traffic island. Surely the mother didn't mean to cross yet. The little ducklings were treading on the hard ground for the first time. The cameramen were waiting for their scoop. Tension and excitement crackled between them. But one duckling was left in the pond. He just couldn't seem to get out. We could see that he was smaller. Mother ducks normally begin to sit on their eggs before they have laid the last one, which often hatches into an immature duckling. In animal cartoons, the feisty little runt scrambling after the others is a familiar comical figure, but reality can be harsh for the last of the brood. The smallest duckling simply could not make it out of the pond. The mother duck led the children out 6 times that day, but the littlest could never follow. Clearly, he was smaller, and he couldn't quite reach the roots and buds of water plants that ducklings feed on. This increased his handicap. It wasn't long before he had earned the nickname Chibi, the runt. By the next morning, the ranks of the media army had swollen to 60. Members of the human species are compelled to outdo the competition, a natural law. Again the next day, the mother led her ducklings up onto land. And again, Chibi was left behind. The concrete wall in front of him, a mere 23 centimeters high, loomed like Mount Everest. Fear of separation from the group, experienced by animals and human beings alike, can be an even stronger force than the fear of death. But a mother bird will often abandon an underdeveloped chick who is unable to keep up. Cruel as this seems, it is a law of the natural world. This reporter seemed to have lost some of his professional detachment. He felt as if he'd just witnessed a winning high jump at the Olympics. And what a moment it was! The mother duck had taken this same route the year before. She had gone out this front entrance, down the steps, and then across the street. It was 6:15 a.m. At last, they were on their way. But the light changed. Their luck had run out. After 6 a.m., the commuter rush took over. Afterwards, we decided that the mother had just been rehearsing, and perhaps with a dim memory of the year before, she had been gauging the dangers of the new environment. In any case, it was a splendid demonstration of her ability to marshal her troops with silent commands, given as subtle movements of her body. Of course, Chibi was the last one in. Duck fever. It struck some as ridiculous and others as quite appropriate. It did remind us of just how little contact with nature we human beings have in our daily lives. This TV crew persevered for weeks. A good question. Even a foreign television crew showed up.
How long have you been waiting here? Since last Sunday. Since last Sunday? Wait a minute, let's get this rolling. We're going to get some of it.
Do you think the ducks will meet the emperor?
Competing news teams began to argue about camera positions. They managed to reach a gentleman's agreement. Rule 1, to maintain a distance of at least 30 meters from the ducks at all times. Rule 2, to monitor the ducks' movements in order to keep all cameras to the rear or to the side. The ducklings didn't seem at all concerned. The next morning, even police cars had been deployed. Apparently, today had been adjudged the day. But it turned quite chilly and a wind came up. The ducklings found a wonderful place to hide. That afternoon, the father duck appeared on the pond. The whole family was together now. Normally, male spotbills offer no assistance whatsoever in raising the ducklings. They are real weekend dads. And this father probably lived most of the time on the palace grounds or somewhere on the coast of Tokyo Bay. Perhaps he had come to say that it was time to make their move. Mr. Tsubayama showed us the course the ducks were expected to take. The news teams were all certain that they would go out through the front entrance, just as they had the year before, because ducks are known to repeat their past movements in any given territory. But there was a back entrance, and the mother duck must have noticed it. A TV cameraman observed that he didn't often work on such interesting shows. The newspaper photographer wondered how he'd go back to prime ministerial press conferences. The art photographer admired the sensual curve of the duck's neckline, the appeal of the little ducklings. The show was over for the day, and the mother duck certainly seemed to have lost all desire to act. She could tell from the noise of the traffic that they had missed their chance to move. Of course, the news teams knew that much too.
明日は何ですか？明日は3時だと思う。本当に。お疲れ様でした。34から31、32どうぞ。
The next day, the sixth attempt. Watching birds can be fine entertainment, an ornithologist friend pointed out. When human beings lived in the wild and had no other forms of recreation, looking at flowers and talking to birds was probably an important part of their lives. All of a sudden, the mother duck set off with her children toward the back entrance, just the opposite of what everyone had expected. But the roar of civilization drove them back.
反対側に行っておりましたキャメラマン一斉に戻ってきました。もう全くカモの一家に振り回されております。
Then, when everybody had resumed his original position, by 7 o'clock that morning, the mother duck had made 11 attempts. The ducklings had consumed all of the plants and algae in the little pond. She knew she simply had to move them soon. After nearly a dozen rounds of tag, however, the members of both teams, ducks and people, found their enthusiasm waning. Seven o'clock. Eight o'clock. The news teams began to leave. The mother duck just watched. The police car returned to its normal duties. Last year they had crossed at 5:35, and it was now past 9. But the mother had been waiting for the duck fever to subside and a moment of quiet to descend. Everyone assemble! They had never seen their mother so tense. The ducklings scrambled out, one after another. Hey, they're going! Our cameraman could barely back out of the way. The unexpected move found the few remaining newsmen scattered. Road width, 40 meters. Traffic volume, 300 vehicles per minute. Stay with me, children, or you will get killed. No coddling now. The mother duck marched resolutely forward without a glance back. Chibi stuck very close to his mother. Down the steps, the point of no return. If someone should startle the mother and she flew off now, tragedy would result. Can't somebody halt the traffic? Somebody said something and a crew member jumped out into the road.
日本テレビ37から本社2番さん。恐れ入ります。カルガマの親子が渡りそうなんで、110番かけますと丸の内署からパトカー来てくれますので、かけてくださいますか。よろしくどうぞ。はい。徳武さん。徳武さん。徳武さん。下がってあげて。さあ止めろ。さあ止めろそこ。さんの人下がって。ちょっと待ってあげて。
The last stage of the trip, the moat. The wall is 2 meters high. The mother duck demonstrated. Chibi was in the last group. Everyone made it, mother and ducklings. Encircling Chibi, the family began to swim off together. Swans can be meaner than they look. We should say, securing territory of their own would be an important task for the ducks. Word of the duck's move reached the emperor himself, and he made a rare public statement. We have received this news with the greatest interest. The new environment would provide the ducklings with many good things to eat. While the children concentrated on their meal, the mother kept a constant watch. The palace grounds, covered with acres of forest and surrounded by moats, were inhabited by many natural enemies of the ducklings. Thus, the mother duck had chosen to nest in the safer surroundings of the man-made pond. These wild ducks would soon have to return to the wild. They must now prepare for that time. The mother duck began the training sessions right away. The section of moat the duck family moved to is known as the Ote moat. From there, the mother decided on an expedition with her 12 ducklings to the neighboring Kikyo moat. It would be a long trek for the ducklings, one whole subway stop. They would have to scale the dike of the visitor's path and penetrate a thick hedge. Behind the mother, we can see the central business section of Tokyo, and beyond that lies the glamorous Ginza shopping district, known to visitors from around the world. So the children could see her, the mother duck stood up high. Rarely would she make herself so vulnerable. But just as soon as the ducklings had emerged, the mother ordered a retreat. The expedition allowed us to observe that there was an older group, able to keep up with the mother, and a younger group, always behind. And then there was Chibi. The ducklings were curious about everything they saw or heard. Spotting a hole, children simply have to go and see what's inside. Watching this scene, neither the mother nor our cameraman imagined the tragedy that would take place at this concrete opening just 2 days later. The rainy season. Japanese literature abounds with poems describing the gray skies and gentle rains of June. But sometimes the long, gentle rains turn into violent torrents. 2 days later, our cameraman noticed that there were only 6 ducklings. Chibi was among the missing. During the sudden heavy rains, the water level had risen very rapidly. Half an hour later, the body of one of the ducklings was found in a river on the other side of the street. This meant it had been washed down the storm drain. The 5 others had probably met with the same fate. The mother searched frantically all day long, flying from one end of the moat to the other. even went back to the dike. The other 6 ducklings dutifully trailed their mother, unaware of the tragedy. The next morning, the search continued. Someone left memorial flowers by the moat. Suddenly, one of the lost ducklings appeared in the distance. It was still alive. And it was Chibi. We recognized his unsteady swimming style. The skies had cleared. One of the ducklings went out to greet Chibi. Then another 2 ducklings appeared. Reunited, the family swam all around each other. 3 would not come home, so now there were 10. Chibi kept as close as he could to his mother. The father duck, where had he been? He seemed pleased that the ducklings were all right. Birds cannot count, of course, but they do recognize and distinguish among their own young. The duck's other father came to see them faithfully. Even on his daughter's wedding day, he rushed directly from the ceremonies to the moat. It is very important for ducks to keep their feathers dry. From a gland on their tails, they take oil with their bills and spread it on the feathers, one by one. This is nature's waterproofing. Their next challenge was to learn to fly. How soon would they be soaring above? 2 weeks passed. Chibi's physical disadvantage grew ever more apparent. One day, the mother's attitude towards him changed abruptly. She began to work persistently to separate him from the others. Among birds such as hawks, whose young are fed directly by the parents, only chicks who win in the competition for food survive. But ducklings feed themselves, so the chances of survival for a weaker bird are much greater. From the mother bird's perspective, however, Chibi was too weak, and her behavior demonstrated her instinct for preservation of the species. But one of the older brothers fetched Chibi home again. He was accepted back into the family that afternoon. The ducks were sleeping in the swan's nest, which they occupied while the swan was away. But now it was coming back. The mother duck did not notice. The swan had assumed a threatening pose with its wings up. Only Chibi noticed. He nudged the others to wake them. Even as the swan drew close, Chibi stayed by the nest, waiting to see that the others escaped. It was like a scene in a fairy tale. The duckling's greatest enemy of all arrived, a typhoon. The mother was safe because she could fly, but the ducklings were at the mercy of the wind and rain. In Japan, fewer than 50% of ducklings live to maturity. The major factor in this low survival rate is probably typhoons. But we found them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Thank goodness. And so much for the statistics. After the rains, summer came at last. The imperial carriage was taken out for an airing, and we wondered which foreign dignitary would be transported in it next. The ducklings had grown very quickly. The news teams, whom we hadn't seen for a while, began to come back. Chibi. Whatever this youngster does, he makes waves. Recently, the swan family had grown too. The river cormorant loves to tease, and he had waited a whole week for a chance like this. So had our cameraman. Their coloring had grown richer, and the ducklings were beginning to get their wing and tail feathers. They would often rear up in the water now and flap their wings, and it seemed that their instinct for flying was beginning to assert itself. They had also acquired the bright blue speculum on each side, just like their mother. The ducklings were beginning to imitate her head-bobbing action as well. At last, the day arrived to practice flying. The mother demonstrated first. Only the two eldest followed. So the mother forced them all to practice by chasing them from behind. On the banks of the moat, duck fever had revived. Could he do it? Yes, he flew. What must the sensation of first flight be? He was now a bird. Even the scary swans contributed to the training. A flock of migrating birds. Our cameraman saw them. The mother did too. When would her family travel? Intoxicated with the pleasure of their newfound skill, the ducklings spent all day that day flying around. But Chibi was not quite ready. Chibi had to paddle hard in the water to cover the distance they could travel with a single wing stroke. The ducks attracted all kinds of admirers.
Koi, 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 koi. Koi, 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 koi.
Not all of the offerings were easy to accept, however. The mother duck began to take the children on frequent short flights. They flew over the visitors' path dike to the next moat. Once they had learned to fly, the ducklings developed very rapidly. But apparently, Chibi did not yet feel the urge. The day when the mother would fly away with her children was fast approaching. We were ready with cameras positioned at both the top and the base of the building. An ice candy vendor.
キャンディーはいかがですか？カルガモキャンディーはいかがですか？
The next day, the mother, with 8 ducklings, all but Chibi, flew away. In just a few strokes, they were beyond the dike, which they'd had to climb over so laboriously a few weeks earlier. They seemed to rejoice at their ability to control the air with their wings. They were gone. That really was his best. Suddenly, the family returned. The flock flew off again with much stronger wing beats than before. At last, it seemed some urge in Chibi was beginning to stir. birds rely on two devices to fly: engines to propel them forward and wings to hold them aloft. But birds have only their wings for both functions, so they must be strong and they must beat the air with skill and power. Chibi still lacks sufficient muscular strength and wing size to get aloft. A familiar-looking flock appeared briefly in the sky. The family returned. Chibi made his first flight. Down came the mother with a sibling. Congratulations, Chibi. You did it. So what do you expect? I am a bird, you know. And then the next day, faster, farther, higher. With many faltering moments and near falls, Chibi flew. Had he fallen in? No, he was still on the wing. Sometimes he just managed to stay above the water. Now Chibi could consider himself a real grown-up bird. Had the day to start the journey back into the wild finally arrived? The mother was bobbing her head as usual before a flight. Chibi was there too.
はい、20です、どうぞ。
気象ぶりを見渡す限り、一羽もカルガモはおりません。
はい、了解しました。ご苦労様。
坪山さん、とうとうあれですね、一番小さいもの飛びましたね。
そうですね。でもまあほっとしたっていう感じとね、ちょっと最後はあっけなかったけどね、まあ別れってこんなもんでしょうね。おそらく帰ってこないでしょうね。
Then the unbelievable happened. The whole family of ducks came back. They circled around above the nest box twice, 3 times. Then they went down into the valley between the tall buildings. Yes, to the same office building. To the same man-made pond. There they are. The mother assumed her usual position on the rock. Why had they come? Perhaps to say thank you? Or maybe to show everyone how nicely the children had grown up? And Chibi was with them. Down in the pond, Chibi seemed to us to be following the thread of a memory. Sayonara, little ducklings. You have taught us much, and we thank you.